Jeffrey Dahmer, the murderer, is described by two words: monster. He consistently appears on the list of the worst serial killers in the United States. What sets him apart from other killers may lie in the horrific things he did to the bodies of his victims after killing them. The words perverted and horrifying are what we can use, but perhaps they are not enough to describe everything he did. The cannibal, Jeffrey Dahmer, the monster of America. Hello, the story I will tell you today takes place in Wisconsin, the 30th state of the United States, and is well known for its cheese production industry. In Wisconsin, there is a city called Milwaukee. This is the largest city in the state and the economic center of the state, once voted the most wonderful city in the Midwest. From the late 1980s to the early 1990s, there were more than a dozen missing cases in Milwaukee. All the missing people are men. The police suspected that there was a murderer in the area. Due to the lack of leads, the police could not find the killer. Until one day, two police officers accidentally discovered a series of cases that shook the United States. Next, let's take a look back at July 22, 1991. July 22, 1991 is the second day of the week. 23.302 police officers were patrolling Milwaukee on a regular basis. When they arrived at a residential building on 25th Street in the northern part of the city, they suddenly saw a man, an African American man, running out of the building. He was not wearing anything, he was wearing a glove. He quickly ran straight to the two police officers and said, "There's someone trying to kill me." At first, the two police officers thought the man was a pervert and didn't blame him. But he quickly explained that his name was J.C.S. Moore. That day, I went to a bar to drink with two friends. During that time, I met a white male. He was very generous and offered $100 to invite a few people to his apartment. Then we drank together and took some pictures. But only I, of the three people invited, agreed to the deal. So I followed him to his apartment in the building above. When I walked into the house, I could smell a very unpleasant stench. Under the living room, there were a few acrylic bottles of heroic paint. And on TV, there was a creepy horror movie. I felt a little strange, so I asked the other person about the acrylic bottle. He said that the acrylic bottle was used to clean the toilet on the floor. After a while of talking, he shook my hand. I know some customers have strange habits, so I didn't react much and asked him why he did that. He said it was his personal preference, so I hope I can cooperate. After that, we went to the bedroom together. Unexpectedly, the smell in the room was even stronger. In the corner of the room, there was a blue plastic box. I guess the smell came from there. Although I hate the unpleasant smell above, I still cooperated lying on the bed to take pictures. At that time, he suddenly took out a knife to threaten me and forced me to take off my clothes. I suddenly felt that something was wrong. But with my hands clenched, it was very difficult for me to escape. While taking off my clothes, I suggested he took off his handcuffs for me. Seeing me cooperate, he let go of his guard and put the knife down. We walked back and forth in the room, singing a song. After I took off my clothes, he slowly came closer and put his head on my chest. He said that I would eat his heart. After hearing it, I felt extremely horrified. I guessed that the other party might be a bit perverted. But I didn't expect him to be so perverted. At that time, I pretended to be both smiling, joking, and calmly pointing out that we were friends. While thinking of a way to escape the difficult situation above, I saw that the door of the apartment was not locked. This is the opportunity. I pretended to be drunk and invited him to the living room to drink a few glasses of wine. After that, I continued to go to the bathroom and waited until he lost consciousness. After leaving the bathroom, but when he didn't notice, I hit him hard on the face. After that, I got out of the door and ran out quickly. Luckily, I happened to see two police officers here. After hearing JC tell, the two police officers followed him into the apartment and went to the 213 apartment on the second floor. After opening the door, a man with white skin came out and opened the door. After being asked, he admitted to the police that he was the one who held JC's hand, but left the key on the bedside table. Because JC mentioned that a man with white skin used a knife to threaten him, the two police officers were very careful and calmly went to the apartment to check. Let's take a look at the map of the apartment. This is the entrance. Next is the living room. There is a kitchen near the door. Then there is a sofa and a TV. This is the bathroom. And finally, there is a bedroom. After the two police officers entered the bedroom, they saw the bedside table was open. When JC looked inside, they saw some photos of the body of the person being dismembered. They believe that the above photos are all true. Immediately, they pulled the gun out and convinced the man, then called the police force to support. After controlling him, the two police officers continued to check the rooms. When they opened the fridge in the guest room, they saw that there was a head inside that had just been dismembered by a man of African American descent and some other items. When the man saw the discovery, he quickly said, "I did all that and I deserve to die." After a while, the police force quickly appeared at the scene and immediately blocked the entire apartment, and the investigation officially began. In the apartment, on the kitchen, there are a lot of people who have been dismembered. In addition to the head, people also found two hearts and a part of the arm in the fridge. The other parts are all wrapped in plastic. The police found a total of 11 boxes, including 4 boxes in the guest room, 7 boxes in the bedroom. Some boxes were whitewashed and some were painted. In the bedroom, there is a blue plastic box. In the chest, there is acid, along with many parts that have been cut off. They belong to 3 different men. In addition, the police also found 2 complete human bones, a broken arm, 2 male genitals, and many other parts in the apartment. They also found a total of 74 images recording the process of dismemberment of different victims. The scene of the case is very terrible, difficult to describe in words. A French lawyer who was in charge of the case after the trial described it as a museum of martial arts rather than a crime scene. The identity of the man was quickly revealed. His name is Jeffrey Leonard Dahmer, born on May 21, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His father is Leonard Herbert Dahmer. He is a scientist. His mother, Joy Annette, is a midwife. After Jeffrey was born, his mother was diagnosed with postpartum depression and was in bed all day. His father had not yet finished school, so most of his time was at school. Both husbands did not have much time to take care of Jeffrey. When he was young, Jeffrey was very obedient and understanding. As he grew up, his mother's condition became more and more serious. She even intended to commit suicide. Every time her father came home, the two husbands quarreled. In 1964, when he was only 4 years old, Jeffrey had to undergo a surgery to get rid of the disease. Since then, he has become shy and does not want to communicate with others. One time, he saw his father taking his animal bones to do experiments at home. That made him feel very excited. Since then, he started looking for animal bones in the forest. In addition, he often catches living animals and points at their bodies to determine the position of the bones. When the bones make a sound, he will be very excited. In October 1966, when Jeffrey was 6 years old, the whole family moved to Dolet Town, Ohio to live. Here, the mother gave birth to Jeffrey a brother and named him David. This is the name that Jeffrey chose for his brother. In the same year, the father also found a job at a research institute in Ohio. In the next 2 years, Jeffrey's family moved many times and finally they chose to live in Basetown, Ohio. Their house is a 2-story house in a secluded forest. Jeffrey was only 8 years old and often wandered around and finally found an abandoned wooden house in the forest. Jeffrey loved that wooden house and turned the house into his secret base. Jeffrey often searched and collected insects or small animals and put them in his base. 2 years later, in 1970, when Jeffrey was 10 years old, in a family meeting, when he saw a pile of bones on the table, Jeffrey asked his father what would happen if those bones were put in the bin. The father was very happy when his son asked a good question, and he pointed out how to clean and keep animal bones safely. Since then, Jeffrey began to collect animal bones on the street or in the forest and bring them to the base to be scattered, buried, and kept. In a few times, Jeffrey was not satisfied with only finding a way to kill small animals. Once, he killed a dog, then cut its head off and used a stick to pierce through and bury it in the forest. The rest of the dog he continued to nail into a tree trunk. After that, he slowly mastered his craft. He even called a few friends to come and see and say that he had accidentally discovered her. Also that year, the mother's disease became more serious. She had many times quit smoking but failed. And the father often went home due to busy work. It seems that Jeffrey has never felt the love of his parents for him during his childhood, but it seems that he has been used to it for a long time. In 1974, Jeffrey, 14 years old, entered a middle school. At that age, his parents didn't care about him. It made Jeffrey feel that no one understood him, so he started to look for a girl to date. He often hid them in his clothes when he came to school. Jeffrey was not good at communicating and had few friends, but he wanted to be noticed by others. Since he was a child, Jeffrey had played a few tricks such as catching an animal falling to the ground and making sounds like an eagle to attract others in the school. Jeffrey's actions attracted the attention of classmates. He quickly became a role model in everyone's eyes, but Jeffrey didn't care. He just needed to attract the attention of others. In the following days, Jeffrey played other tricks in the school. In terms of studying, he only liked biology and was fascinated by sharing animals. At that time, Jeffrey was in puberty, but he didn't have any interest in women. Instead, he liked men. During his study time, Jeffrey had a few boyfriends, but soon they broke up. Then he began to dream about having a boyfriend who could totally serve him and never leave him. One day, Jeffrey accidentally saw a man running on the street. At that time, he was very excited and wanted to have a relationship with that man. A few days later, he hid in a bush with the intention of attacking the man he had seen before. However, that man didn't show up. This was the first time Jeffrey tried to punish him. 3 years later, in 1977, Jeffrey was about to graduate from middle school, but his academic performance was very poor. If it continued like this, it could affect his graduation. Because he was worried about his son, his parents hired a private tutor for Jeffrey at home. At that time, his parents began to fight more often and sometimes even fought. 1 year later, in 1978, their marriage also ended. At that time, Jeffrey was just 18 years old and was about to graduate from middle school. His parents invited him to attend their graduation ceremony, but his mother refused for the reason that his father came. Both his parents didn't care much about him, but they still fought for the right to raise his youngest son, David. Finally, his mother won. His mother and brother returned to Wisconsin while Jeffrey lived with his father. A series of unpleasant experiences happened over and over again that shocked Jeffrey. He felt that his parents didn't love him but only loved his brother. Jeffrey became addicted and became obese all day long. Until June 1978, 3 weeks after Jeffrey graduated from middle school. That day, when he was driving on the street, he saw a man walking on the street. That made him very excited, so he slowly parked his car next to the man and asked him if he needed a ride. The man happily got in the car. After the conversation, he found out that the man was Stephen McKeague. He was on his way to the concert at Lockwood Quarter. Jeffrey said that it was still early and the concert hadn't started yet, so he invited Stephen to his house for a few drinks. Then he drove him to the concert. Stephen happily accepted the invitation. After they arrived at Jeffrey's house, they started to drink and talk. During that time, Stephen always talked about some beautiful women, but Jeffrey didn't have any interest in women. He only cared about Stephen. However, Jeffrey knew that if he proposed to become his partner, he would be rejected. He was very disappointed about that. After they talked for a few hours, Stephen saw that the concert was coming and asked for permission to leave. However, Jeffrey didn't want him to leave. While the man was unconscious, he took out a 4.5 kilograms metal object and hit his head. The man fell into a coma. Then, Jeffrey pierced his neck with the metal object. After that, he took off his clothes and played with the metal object. The next day, Jeffrey was curious about the color of the metal object, so he went to his house and hid in the backyard. A few weeks later, he saw that the kids often played around in that area and felt unsafe. So he dug up the metal object and took the meat out of the body and put it in acid. Then, he used a hammer to smash it into powder and put it in the forest near his house. 1 month after the incident, in July 1978, his father came home and found that he was drinking at home all day. So he found some connections to let him study at the University of Ohio. The University of Ohio, also known as Publix IV, is one of the leading public universities in the Great Lakes area of the United States. When he was studying here, Jeffrey was not interested in studying and was still drinking. Once, his father came to visit him and found that his office was full of bottles of alcohol. That made his father very disappointed. Finally, Jeffrey dropped out only after 3 months. In January 1979, at the age of 19, Jeffrey joined the U.S. military and became a doctor at his father's suggestion. During his time in the military, Jeffrey was said to not have enough conditions to participate in military missions due to alcoholism and other issues, so he went to bed early. Jeffrey felt that if he returned home, he would definitely be blamed by his father. Therefore, on March 24, 1981, Jeffrey decided to go to Miami, Florida. He stayed in a local hotel and found a job at a fast food restaurant on the beach. In addition to working hours, he almost only spent time drinking in his room. 6 months later, in September 1981, his father learned that his son had fallen asleep but had not returned home. He called and asked Jeffrey to return to Ohio immediately. When he returned home, Jeffrey continued to live with his father and mother. 2 weeks after returning, he was detained by the police for 10 days for drunkenness and harassment. During a period of time, his father asked him to do all the housework. In addition, he also forced him to go out to find more work. The purpose was to make him more busy and forget the habit of drinking, but his ideas were not objective. 3 months later, in December 1981, his father said that Jeffrey listened to his grandmother, Catherine Dahmer. Since childhood, the two of them had a very good relationship, so he decided to take Jeffrey to her house in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His father also asked her to convince his son to find a stable job and stop drinking. Because there was nothing to do, after moving to a new place, Jeffrey listened to her, helped her with housework and sometimes went to church with her. Until 1982, a year after moving to live with her, Jeffrey found a job as a blood donor at a blood donation center in the local area. But a few months later, on August 7, 1982, he was arrested for exposing his glasses in front of children and women. He was detained by the police and fined $50, and was fired by the owner. In the next 2 years, Jeffrey lived thanks to his grandmother's charity fund. By January 1985, Jeffrey was 25 years old and found another job as a blood donor. One day, while studying at the public library, he was given a note asking if he wanted to find a gay man. Jeffrey saw the note and did not answer. However, it aroused his desire to hide his identity. From then on, Jeffrey did not want to hide himself and often went to bars and bathhouses for gay men. Once, he buried a male mannequin in the store and hid it in his closet. Then his grandmother found him and asked him to leave. At night, he often brought home a male friend he met at the bar. Every time he went to the bar, he felt that his friend kept moving around, making him feel uncomfortable. He wanted to completely control him, so he came up with a plan. Every time he brought his friend home, he put sleeping pills or painkillers in his friend's cup. He waited until his friend was asleep before he started going to the bar. By doing so, his friend would not be able to move and he could do whatever he wanted to control his friend. However, this is not the end of the story. His crazy thoughts are getting worse and worse. Once, he saw on the news the death of an 18-year-old man. After finding out where he hid the young man, he went to Nha Trang at night and planned to dig up the body of the man to enjoy his pleasure. But after digging a few times, he found the ground too hard, so he gave up his crazy idea. On September 8, 1985, Jaffe was once again charged for exposing his private parts in public. The court sentenced him to 1 year in prison. In November 1987, 27-year-old Jaffe happened to meet a man in a bar. His name was Stephen Tuomi. The second victim was Michigan. Jaffe drove him to the hotel and gave him sleeping pills and painkillers and waited for him to wake up. The next morning, when he woke up, he saw Stephen lying next to him with a lot of bruises on his chest and bleeding from his mouth. He couldn't breathe. Jaffe didn't want to kill him, but he couldn't save him. So he decided to buy a big suitcase to pack the body into the suitcase and bring it to the bar to hide. During that time, his crazy thoughts started to get worse. 1 week later, he split the body under the basement of his bar by cutting the body into pieces and putting them into plastic bags and using a hammer to break the bones into small pieces. It took him 2 hours to process the body. He processed all the parts except for the head and threw them all into the trash bin. 2 weeks later, he put the head of the body into the soil and mixed it with a chemical to cook the head. After that, he removed all the meat and kept the body. But he realized that the body was very crispy after being processed and it would be broken if he wasn't careful. So he decided to throw the body away. 2 months later, on January 16, 1988, he found another target. He met a man named James Doctato, the third victim, in a bar. He invited him to his house and gave him $50. He used the same method to put the medicine in his body and strangled him to death. Then he used the same method to burn the body and only left the head. He processed the head and threw it into the trash bin. After all, he was still dissatisfied with what he had done. In the next period, he used similar methods to commit more crimes. The victims were all gay people he met in the bar. After many experiments, he successfully preserved the bodies of the victims. Most of the bodies were white, some were painted and colored. By April 1988, 28-year-old Jeffrey invited a man to his house. However, this time, he made a small noise in the room. As soon as he intended to kill the gay man, his voice came out of the door. "Is that my nephew, Jeffrey?" After hearing his voice, he felt that if he had an affair with a gay man, his mother might find out. Therefore, he gave up killing and secretly threw him in front of the hospital door at midnight. 5 months later, because he often hung out and often took his friends home at night, his room often smelled bad. His mother couldn't stand it, so she kicked him out of the house. Next, he rented an apartment in a residential building on 24th Street on the north side of Milwaukee. By September 1988, after moving to the apartment, he was forced to use drugs and seduced a 13-year-old girl to have an affair. After being arrested by the police, a psychologist evaluated him. He was diagnosed with a disorderly personality disorder. He was said to be a cold-blooded person who did not believe in others and lacked confidence in life. By January 1989, 4 months later, the trial of Jeffrey began. The result was that he was convicted of second-degree incitement. However, the trial had to come in May 1989 to be carried out. During that time, he was temporarily imprisoned. 2 months after being imprisoned, until March 1989, he was released for 10 days to rest and return home to his family. Unexpectedly, Only 5 days after his release, on March 25, 1989, he murdered another 24-year-old prostitute named Antonizia, the third victim. The next morning, when his wife was not at home, he dragged the body from the basement to the bathroom, tearing the victim's clothes into many pieces. This time, he put the body parts in a bottle to keep and hid them in a wooden box. 2 months later, on May 23, 1989, according to the previous sentence, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. At first, he had to spend a year in prison, but only after 2 months, he was released for good behavior in prison and was transferred to his grandmother's house to live. On May 14, 1990, 30-year-old Jeffy was chased out of the house along with the police to collect his body parts. After that, he was transferred to an apartment on 25th Street on the north side of Milwaukee, which is the apartment number 213 at the beginning of the video. For 2 years here, he has lived a free and unrestricted life, so he has successfully committed 12 murder cases without being discovered. Every time he committed a crime, he lured those men to his apartment for money to take pictures in the hangar. After losing weight and processing the body of the victim, he always used the boxes as a way to celebrate the victory and turn them into a collection of strange decorations in the house. Once, he used a microwave to try to dry the box, but the result was that the box exploded right in the oven. Time later, Jeffy was no longer satisfied with arranging the victim's neck, but instead, he drilled a hole in their head, poured acid or boiled water into it. He thought that if he did so, it would make the opponent fall into a deadlock. They still had a weak consciousness but could not move. He believed that by doing so, he could completely control the opponent. In the afternoon of May 26, 1991, he invited a 14-year-old girl named Konarak Sintasamphone, the 13th victim, to his house for a photo shoot. After the photo shoot, he drugged his drink. Until the girl woke up, he drilled a hole in their head and poured acid into their drink. After that, he dragged the girl into his bedroom. In his bedroom, there was still a body of a man who had died 3 days before and had not yet been identified. That day, he did not understand why he suddenly lost interest, so he left the apartment and went to a bar to have a drink. In the early morning, he returned to the apartment and suddenly saw the girl who had just been drugged talking to 3 girls on the ground floor of the apartment. At that time, he quickly walked over the girl's shoulder and said, "He is my boyfriend and I will take him away right now." The 3 girls did not believe him and called the police. After a while, the 2 police officers were present at the apartment. At that time, Jeffy appeared very calm and said, "Konarak is my 19-year-old boyfriend. We just had a drink." Probably because he was a little drunk and lost control, so he ran out of the house. But the 3 girls wondered that there was blood on his body and it did not look like he was drunk. However, the police did not believe the 3 girls' stories and said that they should take care of their own business. Not long after, 3 medical staff came to the scene and checked the wound for the boy. One of them said he should be taken to the hospital for immediate treatment. But their suggestion was not supported by the police, so they left. Then another police officer came to the scene and the 3 of them took the boy unconscious back to the 213 apartment. After entering the apartment, they smelled a strange smell. A police officer checked the speakers inside the apartment but found nothing. To prove his relationship with the boy, Jeffy showed the police a close-up picture that he took with him in the afternoon. So the police believed his story and left the apartment. After the police left, he felt very angry because the boy had escaped, so he continued to inject acid into his head and killed him. The next day, he asked to take a day off to spend time at home to look after the boy. However, this was not a scary thing. After killing the opponent, he will keep their liver and put it in the refrigerator to enjoy it gradually. For 2 years living here, he was often bullied by the neighbors because of the uncomfortable smell coming out of the apartment. Sometimes the neighbors even heard the sound of screaming. But every time they knocked on the door, he always had some reasons to come in. Until the last time he was found, he killed a total of 17 people. The youngest was 14 years old and the oldest was 36 years old. All of them were African Americans, Asians, and Spanish immigrants. At that time, racial discrimination in the US was very serious. Milwaukee is an industrial city with a large population of foreign immigrants. Perhaps that is why the targets that Jeffrey targeted were not highlighted at that time. This caused a lot of anger among the locals. 3 police officers helped Jeffrey bring the girl into the apartment. Perhaps they were also racial discriminators, so they were reluctant to believe the girl after seeing Jeffrey, a white man. Jeffrey was charged with 17 first-degree murder, but he only admitted 16 crimes in that number. After the incident, some racial conflicts broke out and people despised the perpetrator, Jeffrey. On January 13, 1992, the case was officially brought to trial. During the trial, in an attempt to prevent riots, dozens of security personnel used riot shields and explosives to prevent the crowd from entering. What was surprising was that Jeffrey retraced his confession in court and refused to plead guilty. He stated that he had admitted to the crimes during police interrogation because he was suffering from a mental disorder at the time and could not control himself. His lawyer confirmed that Jeffrey had a mental disorder and was unable to control his actions when committing the crimes. In his final argument, the prosecutor stated that Jeffrey was a rational person who could fully control his actions when committing the crimes. However, he murdered his victims and kept their bodies just to achieve satisfaction and control over them. The crimes he committed caused great confusion and harm to the people of Milwaukee. The trial lasted for 4 months. On May 1, 1992, the jury reached a unanimous verdict after deliberation, and the court sentenced the defendant, Jeffrey Dahmer, to 16 consecutive life sentences along with 941 years in prison. Stephen Toomey, the second victim, was one of the 17 first-degree murder charges that was dropped because Jeffrey claimed he did not remember anything about killing the second victim. He stated that after the sentencing, he was imprisoned at Columbia Correctional Facility, one of Wisconsin's maximum security prisons, which houses over 800 male inmates. At the start of his sentence, Jeffrey was placed in solitary confinement. Later, in order to adapt better to life in prison, the prison management allowed him to serve his life sentence. In prison, he requested the guards to lend him a Bible. Once approved, he read the Bible every day and meditated on all of his wrongdoings. One day, during an interview with a reporter, he explained that his second crime happened 9 years later. He explained that in his memory, he was always driven by the darker side of himself, and he didn't know how to escape it. The reporter asked why he wanted to keep the skulls of his victims. He replied that he was building an altar and drawing a plan for it. On the altar, there was a table, each end of the table had a candle, and 10 heads were in the center. This plan had only been made recently. In the next 6 months, if he wasn't caught by the police, he would finish building the altar. When asked which gods the altar was dedicated to, he replied, "It is for me. That's where I meditate and gain strength," he added. On November 28, 1994, Jeffrey, along with 2 other inmates, went to the restroom to work out. They stayed there for 20 minutes and still hadn't come out. The guards, noticing there was no activity, went in to check. They found Jeffrey and another inmate lying motionless on the restroom floor, both with head injuries. They were quickly taken to the hospital for emergency treatment. Jeffrey was declared dead after being transported to the hospital an hour later because resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful, and the other inmate died 2 days later. The attacker was Christopher Scarver, who suffered from schizophrenia. He stated that God had commanded him to do it and that he was carrying out God's justice. That day, he hid a metal bar in his clothes, went into the restroom, and attacked the 2 inmates while they were off guard. Jeffrey did not resist or make any noise when he was attacked. Jeffrey was a highly cruel individual who caused a series of crimes that shocked the world once revealed. In one interview, he said, "I don't know if God and the devil exist, but I think both are affecting me." Today's video ends here, and I will see you in the next videos. Goodbye.